Hi, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. I am Roel, your co host, joined by our other co host, Francois. How are you doing, Francois?
Very good. How are you, Roel?
I'm doing great. Hopefully, I don't look too tired. I actually just added a puppy to our family on 3 or 4 days ago. It's like having a newborn, but without diapers. So that's exciting. Uh, but I'm
Congrats.
glad to be here on this recording.
Awesome. So what are we doing today?
Yeah, we have a special guest on this episode. His name is Anil Varanasi, and I think it's going to be an awesome story that he's going to tell because Anil comes from Meter. But I'll let him introduce himself. Welcome, Anil.
Hey, Roel, Francois. Thanks so much for having me. The puppy thing makes sense. We have a 4-month-old at home, and I'm a first-time parent, so I
Oh,
hear you.
congrats! So we're
Congrats.
both tired.
I don't know what I am anymore, but yeah, thanks so much for having me. Like you mentioned, I work in a company called Meter that I started with my brother about 10 years ago. We are a hardware software services company that we are building security appliances, switching, wireless, SD-WAN, VPN, all in a single pane of glass as a service. Our customers are IT and networking teams, and what we think about is how do we build really great, beautiful hardware and software to make it easy to get internet, networking, Wi-Fi into commercial spaces. And we do that entirely end to end, from designing the hardware, the operating systems, firmware, distributed systems, APIs, dashboards, all integrated so that we can push better products for IT and networking teams everywhere.
Okay. Well, I think that's pretty interesting because you're doing it end to end. You mentioned you're doing the hardware, the firmware, and I think when companies do that, it tends to be a better product. And I like to compare that to like Apple. When Apple used to make their products, they gave certain pieces to other manufacturers, right? And then they brought a lot of stuff in house, and somehow the product's gotten better. And is that kind of the reason why you guys do it all in house?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, right? So I think networking is one of the most important things for any infrastructure anywhere.
Hmm.
Today, whether it's this call or somebody listening on a podcast or kids watching YouTube or Twitch or self-driving cars, anything is just a packet. Everything got better because networking got better. But somehow local networking felt like it fell by the wayside in the last decade. We felt like there were great products that were pushing all of this. And historically, if you look at things, there's two categories of companies that have been doing good work. One is product companies. These are all the vendors you can think of that build really great hardware, really good software, and then they give that out. Then there's been service companies that help actually do something with that hardware and software. And then, but they might not have access to the firmware, to the hardware, to other things that might actually combine all of this. So when we were thinking about starting Meter about a decade ago, I think today, the term NAS or network as a service has lost so much meaning because it means a million things now to different people. We've been thinking about that obviously for a really long time. We ended up writing about this a bunch, and for folks that are curious, it's actually at nas.com, NAAS.com. You can go read it. That we ended up writing about it. But our goal was to actually try to see if we can combine products and services into one thing and really build something end to end. So what does that mean? That might be a partner or networking team or customer that comes to us today. What we ask of them is an address, a floor plan, and we ask them a bunch of questions on how their things are set up, on security. They might be going to a POP, or they might be going to public cloud or private cloud, and then handle everything downstream of that. So we go help procure the ISPs, and we've actually written software on this. Think of it as Kayak or Expedia, but to buy ISPs. And the impetus of that has been is that you couldn't yet buy the internet on the internet. You could buy so many things. You can buy jets, you can buy food, other things. So we help procure the ISPs, then deploy the hardware. So full IDFs, MDFs, testing all of this, working with partners as well to help test how networks are designed, and then provide really great software that's a single pane of glass that's fully integrated to be able to manage it. So from ISP, network design, network deployment, and then network management, but really all of this in service of building great hardware and software for networking teams and combining that products and services into one great offering.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there because the ISP part does sound interesting, but it also sounds like you've got a pretty good hold of what happens when a network has to be turned up, and taking that ISP portion into consideration. So, how do you guys know what exactly needs to be done and what products need to be there? What kind of what which switch model that like what's your how did Meter get its background in all of this?
Yes. Our models for SKUs is we don't have hundreds of SKUs, which I'm sure we've all seen these like pages and trying to decide between one and another. For us, everything is very simple from a SKU perspective. There's security appliances that are 1 gig, 10 gig. There's switches the same way in 24, 48. And then there's indoor APs and outdoor APs. And what we our model also helps us do is because we are not trying to sell individual pieces of hardware, right? Historically, it's been that somebody makes hardware, then they're selling it for margin to a customer or a partner, and then they kind of wash their hands away. They're just like, "That's yours from now." But I think if we look at how infrastructure is today, is their incentives are much more aligned with the customer and a partner. And as an infrastructure provider, we believe you should be on the hook.
Mm.
And so what we've always thought about is there's this great Alan Kay quote, who's one of the great computer scientists, is that people that care about software make their own hardware. We kind of think about it a little bit further, which is people that care about hardware and software should be the ones responsible for it. Like we
Mhm.
should be on the hook when our products don't work well.
Yeah.
So to your question on how do we know what to install and how do we know what to do, that's really during the onboarding process with the customer to understand what their needs are, how many locations are there, how are they connected, through the site survey process. What is that space like? What are the neighbors like? And then using data and information to do that in real time, and then putting a full package together end to end. We don't really believe that you should just do like a blanket. It should be, everything is so different. And you guys do such great work, even on the wireless side. No network is the same ever.
Yeah. Well, I think you you're kind of showing the value there, but I want to take a step back and talk about like how Meter even came to be and where you were when you had that idea for Meter because you said you started it with your brother, which I don't think we see a lot of I don't see a lot of tech companies where siblings go into business with each other and run this. I'm curious about how that started.
Yeah, I think with these things, there's a tendency to romanticize about things ex post, and that somehow it was this like Newtonian moment that an apple fell on your head and you suddenly knew this is what you're going to work on forever. I don't think it was like that for us at all. I had studied networking in college. My
Mm,
brother and I were working on building deployment systems, networking, hardware, and software for a decade prior to Meter.
okay.
And we just wanted better products over time. And we were hoping somebody else would take the mantle up. But really, I think what started the kernel for us is AWS. We first got a full glimpse of AWS in 2008 or nine. I can't remember exactly when. But the idea that we didn't have to go rent out a space, buy a bunch of racks and servers, and think about RAID and cooling and all of it, and think about how much capital we were putting up each time, right? Every time we were working on something, we had to go put up a lot of capital to go build out a data center. And I think the AWS model really caught our eye on how is that from a customer perspective, which is somebody else is taking on the capital risk. somebody else is doing the operational work that I generally don't want to do anyway, but I still want to have a lot of control over my infrastructure, which is I should be able to
Mm,
change anything,
yeah.
right? So that kind of changed our mind a lot. And then starting maybe 2011, 12 is when we started really seriously thinking about it is why isn't there something like this for networking? Um, why are we still having to put up a lot of capital ourselves? And I think we had just moved into a new office or about to for our previous company. And it was just like big bill of like networking equipment. I'm like, again, we have to spend all this capital. And then it feels like none of the hardware vendors or the software that we were putting on top that they were actually responsible for it. Why is it not like AWS? So then we ended up taking it very seriously, and then started to think about how we would do it. And it turned out, we also wanted to build really good hardware to be able to build really good software. So we then ended up living in China, the two of us, for a little bit over a year, building out the hardware and a lot of stories there. We came back and wrote a lot of the software and started building teams from a lot of the great companies. And it is entirely meter, and that's always been the plan, right? So software for ISPs, security appliances, switches, APs, SD-WAN, VPN, DNS security, all interconnected. And as you guys know, that takes a long time to build. And so I think
Yeah.
finally, after 10 years, we're getting there. But that's some of the kernel of where it all started.
And did you guys start off with all of the products at once, or did you pick one, say like Wi-Fi, and stuck with APs for a bit, and then you added switches and firewalls?
That seems like the better approach, but we took it all on from day one, and it's um, it's been unusual, but I think the investments we've made are starting to pay off now.
Yeah,
But from day one, we've been thinking about and working towards like all meter to again, why are we doing that? Right? What's important is for our customers and partners, the two tenets for us are can we give them really good visibility into what's happening and even better control than they've ever had before Meter came along?
yeah,
And that's hopefully so that we can provide networks that are secure, reliable, and performant. And so, given that, mixing different architectures usually leads to challenges, all the way from how you think about firmware to APIs to the data pipelines to how it all comes together. So it's always been towards Meter being able to build things end to end.
Do you in enterprise networks we see a lot of multi-vendor operating on the same network. I'm sure Roel can tell you
yeah,
stories about that. um, so is it I'm sure I know your approach is more like you get everything from us and then you probably pay like a monthly kind of a subscription fee and then we take care of everything. It's kind of like how you get hydro at your house a little bit. You pay for the infrastructure, but what if you have a company and they're like, okay, we like what you do, but we only want the Wi-Fi or we only want the routing? Do you guys allow this? Do you work with it, or what's your approach regarding those type of customers?
Yeah, most of the customers that we spend time with and do it are enterprises that have really complicated networks, and
Mm-hmm.
not just locally, but where they go connect to. So, we have customers with individual spaces that are more than 500,000 square feet. We have customers with us that have hundreds of locations with us. And you can imagine all those things are different permutations. So the way we actually work with customers on this is thinking about, again, who our customer is. That might be a partner, or that might be an IT or networking team at a company. And they have their own customers, right? That might be a finance team, that might be an operations team, that might be a procurement team. And usually the broker might be is, hey, last year you convinced us we just spent a bunch of money on switches and now you want to change it. That's going to be
Mm-hmm.
hard to kind of get through. So the way we actually work with these enterprises is we actually have a buyback program where we'll buy out existing hardware they have that might be any of the legacy vendors, so that they can switch to a much better architecture, much better hardware and software to have that entire stack. And most of our customers take us up on that. And that's been another way for them to really be able to get the full reliability, performance, and security that Meter can provide end to end.
What do you do with all of that equipment?
So we try to be good stewards of it. I think,
Okay.
so much of the legacy stuff, it matters what you do for the environment, and we take like very serious steps towards it. And that's another thing that customers tell us they're much happier because like they wouldn't normally know what to do with it, right? They
They
would,
usually give it
and
away to colleges or something.
yeah, but these days colleges have so many requirements, and we talk to them all the time. They want and need the latest. They can't
Yeah.
really use the legacy stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
because colleges and dorms and Zoom classes and all these things have
Yeah.
really put a strain on the network, and that's
Yes.
changed a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah. So we try to be good stewards of it and how we recycle and how we do stuff in the back end through our warehouse and our operations. That's the advantage of us being fully vertically integrated end to end.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea to do the buyback and help someone transition. Because I know I've been in environments where like Francois said, like I can't do the switching right now. We just invested in switching. 2 years ago, we were gonna have to wait another
Right.
5, 7 years to refresh that. Um, but it does create, I guess, easier transition for your customers because now they're not thinking, okay, we got to phase this out in a very strategic way and not fulfill their requirements instantly, but get that project going without major issues, right? At least they can get used to the single pane for management. Uh,
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That's how it kind of got started, which is about, I think, 5 or 5.5 years ago. An enterprise customer, did a bunch of tests and on site and all the things you can kind of imagine. And they're like, we love this. Let us go back to our procurement team and our finance team and get back to you. And then the finance team, I think, just sent them that's like, yeah, you just spent a bunch of money last year.
Yeah, I've had a client ask me like, "Hey, do you want to buy this equipment from me?" Like, yeah, I don't have the need to buy. I should have sent them your way. You guys have the buyback program.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from the start, you guys were network as a service, and I think what I've seen lately are the other big vendors starting to hop on this network as a service train, and for me, it was confusing as to what exactly network as a service is, and I don't know if every vendor or does it the same, right? Is it just them giving you the equipment? I don't know if they're doing anything with the network, but I guess for your explanation of network as a service, it's you're doing everything end to end. Um, and I think most people know what that means. But what about engineers who go, well, does that mean I'm out of a job at this point? If I bring in Meter, they do everything. What am I gonna do?
Yeah. I mean, I wish that wasn't the case on where it happens. I think like as people have seen Meter be successful in the last few years, you're right. There have been companies that are starting to kind of get into it, and you have two flavors of this, right? One is some of the legacy providers basically doing financing on top of the hardware and calling that network as a service, and
I
that's
see.
not
Yeah, that's
that's
loan.
one that's one that's one challenge. Second is you have all these newer companies that got started in the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years, as we kind of see it. And they've been looking at what we've been doing and how we do our pricing model, how it is. And that's good. Market expansion is a good thing. And we're happy to lead the way there. But I think what's missing there is you might have some of these vendors say, like, your network should be invisible or don't worry about it. It's fine, kind of thing. And we just like vehemently disagree with that entirely.
Yeah, it's
The
not a set
whole
it and forget it.
right, the whole premise of Meter is that, and why we even started was there weren't great products that people cared about anymore in local networking. Everybody has the shiny object syndrome in the last 10 years about the cloud and data center. But if you look at the local networking and people that are passionate about it, that care about it, that number has dwindled a lot in the
Yeah.
last decade. And so the whole premise for us is let's actually build really great hardware and software for networking teams. And how do we build things that they didn't have access to before? So I think that's probably been one of the things that I've been a bit irked about, which is this whole networking as a service thing has been pitched by other folks as like, don't worry, don't worry about it. It's invisible. Just we'll handle. No, it should be really great software. Again, let's use the AWS example, right? If three of us go spin up a big server cluster on EC2, for example, we can still go to the console and make any changes we want. There's no limit to what we can go change. We can go change the entire VPC cluster, what's happening with EC2, how it connects, all of those things. We think that's exactly how it should be for networking as well. You should get really great defaults and an extension of your networking team that's helping you manage the network. But we don't think, replacing or any of that. It's augmenting and it's helping. And these days, IT and networking teams are not getting headcount, and they're actually being asked
Yeah.
to do a lot more than they ever used to be.
Mhm.
And we hope to help with that. So if there's anything people take away on like why we're different, which is one, we actually do it end to end. It's not alone and like financing on top of it. But the really big thing is we believe there should be even better control and software for engineering and networking teams.
Okay. So the engineer themselves can go in and tune the Wi-Fi, tune something with the switch port, and even tune something with the firewall. So it's not like they're, because we did mention a single pane of glass for managing. So it's not like there's just this dashboard and you can see everything's working or not, but there is configuration that they can do. And then
Yep.
you have meters team that can support that person if needed. And I'm guessing because you have a lot of customers, does that mean you have a ton of engineers everywhere?
Yeah, so it is a spectrum, right? We've seen really large enterprises with small networking teams or IT teams, and then they want us to manage all of it. And we've seen really small companies, because of their business, might have a really great networking team and they want to co-manage it. So it's really just a spectrum on it end to end. And then on the control, you're absolutely right. You think about everything from like policy-based routing to DNS to radio profiles to how we want to do radius. Everything is fully configurable with meter
Okay.
end to end. But it depends on, it's a spectrum. And we try to have that be available. Again, AWS is a great example. If the three of us again go decide to go put up a new app on EC2
Yeah.
and never touch anything underneath, fine. But if we have particular opinions on how things are connected, that's fine too.
So how much of the service do you guys do, and how much do you expect the customer to do? Like, how do you? I'm guessing you may have. I'm not familiar with your pricing, but you may have like different options based on what the customer wants. I'm just curious to understand. If I'm a customer and then I want to get metered, like how much effort is it required from me? Do I need to do the network architecture, the Wi-Fi design, or anything like this? That's for day zero operation. But then after that, from day two operation, like, will you guys handle my tickets, my unhappy users? Like, where is the line?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good question. We don't have tiered pricing today based on like a la carte, right?
Mm-hmm.
We do things end to end, working with our customers. Now, the more mature or larger a networking team is at an enterprise, we take more input on network design and other things that they've already looked at and tried. And again, the goal is to build a really great network. And if they don't have that expertise or they don't have that input, that's fine too. And we do it all the way. Where I'm talking about more is like being able to still control things. That's universal for everyone. And then
Mm-hmm.
on your question of support tickets, we are interfacing with the IT and networking teams rather than each individual customer of theirs, right? So an employee at a company, the IT team is our funnel. Again, same thing as any other infrastructure as a service, right? You don't have everybody in your company calling AWS. You have your DevOps engineer calling
Mhm.
AWS. It's the same model.
So how is it scalable for you? Do you have to hire more people as you're getting more customers?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true for any business. As you get more
Yeah.
customers, you do have to hire more, for sure. But I think particularly for us, there's a few advantages that happens, right? And I hate saying this about like having, network effects in a network business, but the interesting part is what you can learn from one network on how you're designing it. That might be in a school, a warehouse, a life sciences lab, or retail, healthcare, office space, and how can you make that better for the next customer, but also what you learn from the next customer and go apply that to all your customers. And we routinely see this across security, across wireless, other things. So I don't think it'll be like a one-to-one scale, but as our software gets better and as we get better, we will have to scale the team, but it won't be directly proportional to the number of customers.
And
That's
what's the
interesting.
sorry, Ra, I was going to ask, what's the advantage of, like, how do you take advantage of having all control of all of this, the entire stack? Like I'm thinking software wise, you can do some pretty cool stuff, and you can have
Yeah.
like pretty much like a almost like a zero touch initial provisioning and stuff. But so where do you innovate on that front?
Yeah, I mean, we've gone really far on this. We have applications even for deployment, for an operations install teams, to how that gets configured, but even how we think about architecting our backend, right? So let's pick switches, for example. Every one of our ports on that switch is actually just virtualized in the backend. So that configuration is applied even before hardware is ever attached. And then not just that, it can be validated as well. And
Mhm.
again, industry term for this is like a digital twin, but we have true
Mhm.
digital twin of this because of the fact that it's meters hardware, fully virtualized, configurable, and validated. So we can do some really amazing things from provisioning, then day one for validation and testing, and going forward as well. How do you actually keep everything up to date, not have different firmware issues, compatibility issues,
Yeah.
to what does the data pipeline look like? How does the software architecture speak to it? But then also the pane of glass can go really far because you know what's underneath and you know how it's developed and you speak one language. The beauty of how we build software, and I really mean beauty, is not just pixels, but the way it works and how it feels, is that we hope our engineers or our customers can do really complicated things, but without having to fumble through those. And that can all be possible because of the architecture and because of being fully vertically integrated end to end.
I think you touched
Uh,
upon a really good point, which is software and the quality. I think a lot of the bigger vendors are having these challenges with code quality, even sometimes like the quality of the hardware. As you add more customers and scale, how do you guys control that process and ensure that you're not having these issues with the firmware as you get deploy them? Because if it's network as a service, I'm assuming like as new versions come out, those can get pushed to all of those devices. And where I can see problems are if you have to maintain a lot of older versions of code. And so now your team is distributed amongst maintaining old code while developing new stuff on the new code. To me, that sounds like where a lot of bugs occur and where a broken process is with code quality.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Context switching is one of the hardest things in software engineering, right? You're working on this is your assumption. You have some sort of mental model of the code base in your head. Then you have to now go think about an entirely different version and then switch context. And that's where issues happen.
Mm.
With our model, not only are the software versions kept up to date, but all of our hardware is kept up to date at no cost to our customers and partners as well. So as we release new hardware, we automatically upgrade all of our customers. Now, there's two advantages that come from that. Obviously, customers have ton of advantages of getting latest and greatest all the time. But even as a company that's helping maintain infrastructure, one is that we can support things better. To Francois' question earlier, if we always have the best hardware and software out there, we don't have to worry about all the esoteric edge cases for support, right? And those pile up over time. And second, on software development as well, we can always target the latest and greatest because not only are we upgrading the software, but also updating the hardware for customers at no cost to them. So that's one big reason on how we can do it. But second, actually, it's less about each individual code bases and each versions of the code base. It's actually about the architectures you end up selecting for a few different things, which is one, how do you process packets? Two, how do you mutate packets? And three, how do you actually move packets? The architecture you end up selecting for each of those things, that's what matters actually decades from now. And when you see companies that end up being relevant and still providing great products, it's because they ended up selecting the right architecture a long time ago. You mentioned Apple before as like a corollary to this model. If you go do iOS programming today, it still says NS object before any object-oriented program that you do. NS is next step. It was Jobs' company that Apple ended up buying to bring him back. And all of the kernel of it came from that. And that's an architecture that was selected for object-oriented programming, I don't know, 30, 35 years ago. And it turns out to still be so effective. So yes, there's a bunch of things we can do on upgrading our hardware automatically. We do that for our customers. Making sure there's always the latest firmware and software versions for our customers so that we have the number of versions out there below. That's true too. But the real high order bit here is that, are you making the right choices for packet processing, packet mutation, and packet movement?
So talking about this, I'm wondering in terms of network architecture, we've used to have like the core distribution and access layer. Did you guys see that studying the different architecture, there may be a way to do it in a simpler fashion? Controlling the entire stack, or are you guys do you stick to what we've been doing for 4 years now in terms of network architecture?
Yeah, so I do think there is a lot of greatness for network architectures.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that this call is even working is an incredible thing, right? Like if you think about all the things that have to go from my laptop to this call all the way up to BGP and come back down to you guys hearing it, there has been a lot of great innovation, a lot of great choices for this to work. What we think about is less about let's reinvent the architecture entirely. We do that some parts of it for sure, but for majority of our work is doing the basics really, really well. And that, it turns out, you can do 50% in like 50% of the time, but to get to like 90 or 95%, it takes like 4x the amount of time to do the basics right. And so we're less of like, hey, we're just reinventing the entire architecture and all that stuff, but we really believe in doing the basics. It's actually why, I mean, Roel and you and others haven't heard us be that loud about who we are for a decade. We've been like very deliberate about this, and we believe in like having good products. But what makes good products great is the basics are phenomenal.
That's good. I like that. I like that you mentioned the basics and having that good foundation because even for me, as I talk to other engineers who want to make it to the next level, get to the next step, I always reference knowing and having a good foundation because that'll get you far. That'll get you with a good skill set as you continue on in your career, and it's kind of the same way for your company as you describe it as you as you focus on those basics and be deliberate. Like it sounds like you have a lot of intent with what you guys are doing on the with your products. I think one thing I wanted to touch upon was you talked about upgrading people, and I think with a network as a service, that was one thing that was in the back of my mind is like how if I have APs, like I have 15 APs in my office, and let's say the next Wi-Fi protocol comes up, what does that look like? Do they just ping you guys and go, "Hey, we want to hop on Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7?"
Yeah, it's more proactive. We're the ones doing it. We try to
Oh,
help
okay.
our customers understand what's coming down the pipeline. Um, and then we have a release process ourselves where we kind of go through our customers and who we're giving it to first. Obviously, the customers that, because we understand how their networks are being used, if they really need the latest protocol, they're the first ones to get it, and then we kind of go down the pipeline. But our expectation is customer is not the one that's coming and pinging us. We're the ones that are proactively doing it. We try to do it around a time that works for their business. This gets even harder as some of our customers run 24/7 in manufacturing
Yeah.
and other things, as I'm sure you guys have dealt with as well, where we want to upgrade, they want to upgrade. It's just when's the best time for the business.
Yeah, exactly, and
um,
that's how a lot of companies end up with super old
yeah,
hardware is because they can't upgrade it, there's no time.
yeah. So for the 5% of the customers who run 24/7 without any breaks, that's challenging. The other kind of, let's say 20-25%, even if they're running 24/7, they have times where they're also doing maintenance themselves, especially in manufacturing. We have companies that build batteries to like hydrogen tanks, whatever the case might be. They have maintenance time themselves. We try to do that. But
Okay.
for majority of the other customers, let's say in retail or offices or education or life sciences, there are times where they're not using their networks, and working around that is what our operations team does for them.
Awesome. Well, I think you have a really interesting business model here, and really interesting how you guys started up with you and your brother, and then to where you are today. Like truly, it does truly sound like network as a service, but still giving me an ability to go in there and get dirty with the configuration if I need to, but still have, I guess, like an umbrella there, someone to help out if I need to. And I think that's key for really lean teams where maybe I'm being pulled into another project, but I need to get this switch configured for this office here. And I know we didn't touch upon it in too much detail, but like the whole ISP selection too is a headache where I need to figure out what kind of internet I need here. It sounds like you guys have a solution to get an ISP from your dashboard as kind of building your network. So I think there's a lot to see from Meter, and as you talk, I get more interested in it and wanting to play with it myself. What do you think, Francois?
Yeah, I feel like the it would be nice to see the dashboard and the metrics you were talking
Yeah,
about. Maybe we should do a follow-up episode.
for
We
sure.
we can probably also add some screenshots in the show notes if you guys are interested in having a look at the solution. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So Neil, where can people go to find more or even learn more about you and Meter?
Yeah. So we're at meter.com, meter.com. And that's exactly right, which is what you'll see from us more over the next few months and even years of the things that we're investing in is how do we build even more control into our products and even more visibility for our customers? And how do we make that easy? And I hope by the end of this year, some of the stuff we will show pushes even more further on that. So meter.com is the best place to find us. My email is very simple, anil@meter.com, ANIL. I'm an engineer myself. I'd love to talk about this, and I'm happy to walk through, and we'd love to get feedback from folks on what we can do better. And if people had a magic wand on what networking can do, we'd love to learn and do that.
Awesome. Well, Anil, thank you for joining us here on this episode. And for you guys, if you want to learn more, head over to our show notes as well. We'll include some visuals of what Meter looks like. If you want to watch the video and see us talking, you can go onto YouTube. So either way, head to clearsend.net, look up Meter. And I just want to thank you all for joining us on this episode. Thank you, Anil, for taking the time out of your day to speak to us.
Thank you both for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you.